The Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens are thriving thanks to signing free agent running backs. Who will outshine the other on Sunday, Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry? We take a first look at that matchup. Eagles-Ravens coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Louis DiBiase, joined as always by Gino Camilleri. We are brought to you today by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Eagles, Ravens, I think the game of the week across the NFL on Sunday at 4:25. Jalen Hurts versus Lamar Jackson. Saquon Barkley versus Derrick Henry. Gino, it's the top two rushing attacks in football, and it was already two elite rushing offenses over the last several years, ever since Lamar took over for Baltimore, Jalen took over for Philadelphia. But I don't think it's a coincidence that both of these teams are at the top of the league, and both of them exploited a very overcorrected market at running back this year, where they could get two of the best players to ever do it at this position for the same cost as we always use Darnell Mooney. But yesterday I talked about like all these average tight ends that are making the same amount of money. You know, Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet, and both of these teams had the flexibility as contenders with complete rosters to go after these players. And it has taken them from, again, an elite level almost to a historic level now. Like, I don't know how teams stop these rushing attacks.
One of the things that I had a little bit of pushback with in regards to this discussion, and I think Marcus Mosher, host of Locked On Cowboys, made a point about this, that these three signings, and Josh Jacobs thrown in there as well, isn't indicative that quote-unquote running backs don't matter. Rather, it pushes closer to that direction that running backs don't matter. And I was saying in the back of my mind, I kind of feel the opposite. Like, I firmly believe that this is against the grain, that running backs kind of do matter for once, but you do have to have the offensive line. My point and my thinking is these were three teams that already had very successful rushing offense. You look at Green Bay with Aaron Jones. You look at what the Baltimore Ravens were able to do with J.K. Dobbins over the last couple of years in and out of the lineup, and a whole bunch of Gus Edwards in that rotation as well.
Justice Hill,
The Philadelphia Eagles with Miles Sanders and DeAndre Swift and Josh Adams going back a couple more years. But then you bring in an even greater influx of talent at a position where if you have an established offensive line, which all three of those teams had, you can only expand on what your run offense already was.
Right.
Because these guys put you at a level that you did not have before. It's like adding nitrous onto a already fast sports car, right? You remember watching the Fast and Furious movies, and they would have that button that they hit, and their cars just got like instantly faster. That's
it's
the
already
injection
a card. They just have the nitro.
Exactly. That's Saquon Barkley. That's Derrick Henry. That's Josh Jacobs. To the point where these guys do matter. These guys are making a clear difference. These guys are performing at offensive player of the year, MVP level consideration, and all of these teams, outside of, if you're watching the show, Lou just put up a graphic of the top 5 rushers. Chuba Hubbard was in the conversation there as well. Jahmyr Gibbs was number 4, Josh Jacobs 3, Derrick Henry 2, Saquon 1. The top 4, those guys are all on teams that are competing for playoff spots right now, pushing against the grain of what the NFL has become, this pass-heavy league where you and I, for the longest time, said, yeah, you got to be against the grain. You got to be able to throw with the rest of the league. Now you just got to be able to put up points, and it seems like rushing the football might be the way to do that in this day and age.
Yeah, especially in 2024, because there is, Gino, I think both on the field and off the field, a complete market inefficiency when it comes to running the football and running backs, and an overcorrection where the entire league is in unison now, where everybody has the same philosophy on this position. So you could get a Saquon Barkley at a $13 million clip. You could get Josh Jacobs or Derrick Henry for the price of a wide receiver 2 or an average tight end. And look, now they're all the top leading rushers. Saquon leads the league in rushing yards, 2 and 3. Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs. 4 of these 5 guys, Gino, were free agent signings or a first-round pick in the last 2 years. So I'm not suddenly a guy that's going to say, yeah, now every year you pay all the running backs big-time money as much as you'd pay A.J. Brown or a quarterback or a franchise left or right tackle. Like, no, I don't think that's the case now all of a sudden. I don't think because these guys are having success, the league's going to go completely to the opposite side of the spectrum next year. But I do think there will be some median met, right? I think they'll see the success these teams are having. And I think contenders will now say, hey, yes, a running back, they do matter. Like, sure, we could get 70% of the production of these players with a Jordan Mason or a Chuba Hubbard type of player. But why not take it to another level by bringing in one of these players? I think you will see a lot more good teams with complete rosters not just throw these players out. And another guy you can mention in this equation is like a Joe Mixon, who's having success in Houston that we didn't talk about either.
The thing about running backs not mattering is that if everybody thinks that, there's going to be a bunch of guys that do matter that aren't going to get paid. And that's exactly the category that Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, and Josh Jacobs kind of fell in.
This one's so far that like Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley are 2 of the best to ever do it. Like running back not mattering went so far in the league that those guys were available for nothing. I mean, I don't think that'll happen again. If a Bijan Robinson ever hits the open market, I don't think it's going to be this tumbleweed market like it's been for these stars.
There is now a middle ground that is being met to where the Saquon selection, the Ezekiel Elliott selection, those aren't ever going to happen. Like, as good as Ashton Jeanty is, he's not going to be a top 5 pick in the National Football League because the value of running backs is clearly lesser than other positions, but for a certain amount of time, Lou. And that's the thing. If you can get that player for a limited amount of assets in terms of the Eagles, you didn't have to give up anything to go get said player. Outside of the top 5 rushers, Lou, Chuba Hubbard was a middle round pick. Jahmyr Gibbs was the only one that was a top 15 selection. You might see more running backs go in the first round because teams are identifying this, that they can capitalize on a market where everybody wants to go wide receiver heavy. Well, now teams are finding their number 1 wide receivers. They're building their rooms. They're more exorbitant than ever when it comes to numbers. Well, that means running backs are going to fall in the draft, and that's what has happened over the last couple of years. You're going to see a class this year specifically, which has so many guys. I think rounds 2 to 4 are going to be filled with running backs selected, and I wouldn't even be shocked to see the Philadelphia Eagles draft one in that 2 to 4 round frame because of the pushback towards the middle, which running backs were. And what running backs need to be, Lou, they need to be paid like a top 5 player on your offense because of how often they are handling the football, and teams got away from that, and they haven't been paying guys. But then when the outliers come to be, you have to pay them. Those are the guys that you have to go and get.
Yeah, these are outliers. Right. Like, I'm not going to say suddenly you have to go out and pay like a Miles Sanders big-time money, Gino, because it is still a very replaceable position from a production standpoint. I mean, just look at some of these guys like Chuba Hubbard, who the Panthers, they paid Miles Sanders all that guaranteed money, and that mid-round guy balls out. Jordan Mason was top 3 in rushing, or top 4, before Christian McCaffrey came back. So it is true that running backs, again, you could find them at a dime a dozen. I just don't think there's going to be a time now where people just throw out a Saquon Barkley or a Derrick Henry, or at least not good teams. Like, I do understand why the Titans didn't bring back Henry, why the Giants didn't bring back Saquon, why the Raiders didn't bring back Jacobs. But again, good teams, I think they're going to see what the Eagles, Packers, and Ravens did and say, yeah, let's try to emulate that. And then I think Howie's going to find another way to zag when everybody else is. And this was just another way to do that. And I did that. That's what I love about Howie. We even did a show together this offseason where we were like, okay, he always says he's going to try to be different. What is it this year? And we nailed it that it was running back. I wonder what it is next year, what he's going to try next.
This is one of those spots that you got to be happy they were proactive in this regard. Sure. And I believe that excuse me, that this isn't the first time they've been proactive at running back. They've been trying to be ahead of the curve. And
Sure.
if you go back to 2017, winning the Super Bowl without that rushing attack, you don't win any of those games down the
No,
stretch. You
Ajayi was the
needed
missing
that.
piece for sure.
You truly needed that Jay Ajayi piece. But we're in a world now, Lou, that I think enough teams have gone down that money ball route and seen that we can get enough off the bone to win. But if we truly want those superhero caliber players, you're going to have to pay up. But this isn't we're going to have to overpay for a Gabe Davis like Jacksonville had to do, for example, right? And we're not going to have to overpay for Bryce Huff like the Eagles had to do in terms of edge rusher or teams do at cornerback or any of the other premier positions. This is a position where your overpayment in regard to the rest of the position groups on the football team is so minimal. I think we'll get to a world where numbers get closer to what Christian McCaffrey got in his big extension, but it's never going to get to that level. That was the bubble that burst. I think quarterback is probably the next position where this happens, then probably the premier receiver position, and I would say corner after that, where people just pay, and then it's like, okay, no, we don't really have to pay these guys just because they're the next in line. Running back got like that for a while. It's like, oh, you're the next premier running back, you get an extension, you're next in line, you get an extension, and then teams just said, no, we're just going to franchise these guys if they're special. If they don't want to get franchised, let them go to the open market. And a team like the Eagles, a team like Baltimore, they'll be willing to pay if that is the last shoe to drop in terms of what they need to go win a Super Bowl. And for the Eagles to say otherwise, look at what Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell did in that Super Bowl. Do you not think Saquon Barkley would have had a much bigger impact in that football game?
Look at the Ravens and the Chiefs AFC title last year. They needed a Derrick Henry.
Go.
And if they would have got that deal done at the trade deadline and got Henry in Baltimore, maybe they're playing in the Super Bowl against the 49ers and, not the Chiefs. So it's a fascinating discussion. I think both teams struck at the right time for the right player, and it's why the Eagles and Ravens are two of the best teams in football. A lot of that is because of Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. Again, though, the Eagles, the main problem for them on Sunday is stopping Lamar Jackson. They're going to have to do that without both Brandon Graham and Bryce Huff. We'll talk about the edge position coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. This episode of LOE is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. If you don't know what Prize Picks is by now, it's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions, yes, B as in billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. All you have to do is pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. If you have 4 correct picks, you can win up to 100 times your cash, as I said. And if you want to get in on the action and sign up today, you're going to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. So think, is James Cook going to get more than 60 yards next week? Is Joe Burrow going to pass for more than 1.5 touchdowns? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. You're going to be sitting around tomorrow during Thanksgiving, getting on the action over at Prize Picks with just little as 2 player selections, more or less. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Eagles is also brought to you by Skylight Frames. Missing someone this holiday season and want them to be a part of your festivities from afar? Trust me, I got a lot of family across the country. We've got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 1 minute, and it's seamless sharing too. Invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email. You can add new photos straight from your phone from anywhere. The touchscreen is a game changer too. Swipe through photos, tap to see new photos sent, tap the heart button to say thank you to the sender, and it looks beautiful in your home. Now is a limited time special offer for our listeners. Get $20 off your purchase of Skylight Frames when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's skylightframe.com/NFL. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. Thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, and happy holidays if we don't talk to you before Turkey Day tomorrow. Got some football action. I hope you enjoy what's it going to be, Gino? Cooper Rush against, I don't even know if it's Tommy DeVito. He's going to be hurt. I think we're going to have to watch
looks like
Drew
he's
Lock,
gonna be
who I know
starting,
Eagles fans love after last year. So
no, don't love him too much.
The first game and the last game aren't bad, though. Bears-Lions is okay, and then I think Packers-Dolphins is good.
Got to hope that the Bears somehow can wiggle out of that game with the win.
Eagles have rooting interest tomorrow, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. You want to root against the Lions tomorrow.
Root against the Packers, too, I think?
I don't know. I think you're going to get three teams from the NFC North regardless.
Yeah.
It's an interconference matchup anyway, but just hope that we get a couple good shots of miserable Jerry Jones on this holiday. That's always a fun one to see.
I agree, for sure. For the Eagles, they got to take care of business Sunday in a big matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. Taking on Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, that's no easy feat. And it's going to be even tougher, Gino, because they're without both Brandon Graham, who's out for the year, and Bryce Huff, who still is out with that short-term IR designation with that wrist injury. He's going to miss at least the next 3 games. They did sign Charles Harris yesterday, so they did bring in some help. Former first-round pick in 2017, does have 3 sacks this year. He'll be that 4th man in the rotation right now until Huff is back. But again, the main question remains with the edge group now is 2 things. 1, can Josh Sweat sustain the success he's had so far this year with 7 sacks? If there's an uptick in his snap count like last year, is he going to burn out again? Can he sustain? And, okay, Nolan Smith, you've taken a step this year. Jalyx Hunt, we've seen flashes. Is there another gear to get to? Because we kind of need you, even if it's a year too early, to get there now. Those are 2 main questions now at this group.
The guys that were tasked to have that year 2 to 3 jump, they were able to lock in. I think Nolan Smith really settled in when it mattered. He was the guy at edge where you were saying Jordan Davis has to do that on the interior, Nakobe has to do that at linebacker. Now Nolan Smith really has to settle in and be a full-time player. I think he has done that. Now the next question is, can a rookie who is tasked to probably be a half-year player, and I think this was the timeline you and I originally set for Jalyx Hunt when they drafted him, Lou, that we'd probably say halfway into the year he starts to get his footing and find an uptick in his reps. He better be ready to go now, because that uptick, it is going to be dramatic. It is going to skyrocket over the next couple weeks. Charles Harris will probably be the first guy in that rotation to get a go. You'll see Teron Jackson as well. They'll probably elevate him on some game
your guy's
days.
Back, Gino.
They signed KJ Henry to the practice squad as well. It's clear that they're trying to find somebody else in that rotation. But I'm going to say 2 things are going to be more clear. You're going to see a bigger amount of bodies in terms of who is playing that position.
For sure.
As in the 5 tech over the defensive end, opposite Josh Sweat, opposite Nolan Smith. That probably will be Milton Williams sometimes. That'll probably be Jalen Carter at times. They allowed a player like Fletcher Cox in the past to do that, and they trusted him because he was one of their premier players on the defensive line. I think they're going to start to trust Jalen Carter to do that more. And it's not like he can't, Lou. If you are going to say which one of your defensive linemen has the speed and the agility to get off the edge and potentially run the C gap and have to run the hoop, it's Jalen Carter. But at the same time, Lou, I think this only makes Fangio and his creativity shine that much more, because now it
got to use linebackers more.
Dude, you're going to have to use everybody. Like Nakobe Dean is going to have to probably stand up on the edge at times.
You got to be creative.
You're going to see more Zach Bond coming downhill, and I still wish you had Patrick Johnson sitting around. I wish you had Julian Okwara sitting around, because those guys would come in real handy at this point in the year.
This sucks, man. Like, it would be nice to have a trade deadline to get somebody.
If they extended it still a couple more weeks, that would be fantastic. But here you are, you're sitting there with 3 guys up top that are really good, Lou, obviously. You're going to have Sweat is going to take on a much much bigger role. And he has to. And then you're going to see Nolan Smith take on a much, much bigger role. And Jalyx Hunt, if there was ever a time to live up to a third round draft pick grade immediately, the time is now. But I still think most of it, Lou, it falls on Fangio because he has had the luxury of having a relatively healthy group throughout the outside of the first 4 games. Since then, he's got Cooper DeJean in the rotation. He's had everything healthy outside of Darius Slay in and out. Now, this is the first time that real adversity is hitting their defensive line, and they're going to have to buck up. And I think it comes in the Moneyball mentality that we were just talking about. It's not going to be one guy. It's not going to be 2. It's going to be a bunch of guys in a group effort having to make up for the play that was lost in Brandon Graham and Bryce Huff being out. Bryce Huff coming back and being healthy and being fast and physical and being the true run setter that they wanted him to be when they brought him in on top of being that edge rusher that could get to the passer. There's no questions anymore, Lou. Like, it's sink or swim. You're out to sea with no lifeboat coming for help.
Yeah, and look, the Eagles, like, there's a lot of questions. Like, Josh Sweat's a free agent next year. Bryce Huff, do we think he can be a top 2 guy in this rotation? Is Brandon Graham going to be back? Jalyx Hunt, what do we have in this third-round rookie? They've got money next year to spend. They have draft capital. Like, this is a big opportunity for these edge players to set their roles for the long term, because if Howie looks at this like last year and the edge guys disappear, like Hassan Reddick, he said, I'm not going to pay this guy next year. Josh Sweat, he almost let him go. He brought him back on a 1-year deal. These guys can prove to Howie, like, hey, Bryce Huff is that guy I spent money on. I don't need to go up in the first round and go get an edge rusher or pay big money for somebody. Josh Sweat does deserve that contract extension. Oh, we do have something with Jalyx Hunt. Nolan Smith's breakout, it took another step. Like, this is a huge opportunity for these players. But like you said, it's really mostly going to come down to Fangio, and I'm glad if this is going to happen. For the first time in a while, the Eagles have real question marks on the edge. I'm glad it's with Fangio as the coordinator and not a, Sean Desai or Jonathan Gannon where it's very personnel dependent. If anyone's going to be able to mask the loss of these players, it is the Fangio we're getting this year who's, balling out right now as a coach.
And he is truly in like a general form right now where he is just at his battle plans and what he's scheming up week to week. Like, he always seems to be a step ahead of the opposing coaching staff. And now more than ever, Lou, to a degree, it might be a benefit for him because there's limited amount of tape when you're going to have, let's say, the rotation of guys that they do have. You were starting to see more of Sweat and Nolan Smith as a starter, but how many times are you really seeing Jalyx Hunt in a rotation with either of them? It was Brandon Graham. It was Bryce Huff. That was the tape that you were getting. Maybe now you can change some of those fronts and give some of these quarterbacks some headaches moving forward. You get this opportunity, and then you get 4 of them at home, Lou. I think that's going to be what is going to be a great test for you, is how those guys are going to thrive at home. Because let's say Charles Harris comes in there and he could just thrive as like a rotational pass rusher for you, and he's only tasked to get 2 to 3 sacks the rest of the year. Playing at home with the crowd and that environment and the rest of the guys where you're not going to be a number 1 and number 2. You're the 4th guy in the rotation. That's what we have to remember. The discussion we're having isn't the best guy on your defensive line. If Jalen Carter went down, there's no discussion to be had. There's no way you replace him. As good as Brandon Graham was playing, we also have to realize what his role was.
Yeah, because heading into the year, it was supposed to be Huff and Nolan Smith mostly carrying you. Like, those were the 2 big guys, and then Josh Sweat. BG was supposed to be the 4th, and maybe if Jalyx Hunt looked ready, BG might be the 5th guy. So he ended up being more, and he looked like prime BG for most of the season. But yeah, you're right. These were the guys that are healthy when Huff's back that were supposed to carry you anyway.
Exactly.
So it's good that they're going to have to answer these questions for better or worse.
That's the thing, and you need to know if those guys can play.
You have to, because if not, next year you need to go spend big money or take somebody in early in the draft.
And it's a good look to how you might survive in the playoffs. Like, if things don't look good this Sunday and you're like, okay, we clearly need to get Bryce Huff back, but our plan that we set out this Sunday, let's try something different against the Panthers. You got a couple weeks here.
Like experimenting.
Yes, you have to experiment and figure out what works, because you're one injury away, even when Bryce does come back, to the same exact type of scenario happening. So now is the time to put it through the ringer. Now is the time to test out multiple recipes before you have to hard launch this restaurant. This is the time that FanDuel can really have some fun with it. But I think it's a really good opportunity. I'm not looking at this as I'm looking at it as a negative because it sucks that Brandon Graham isn't on the football field. 100%. But the youth was always the movement here, and this is just another step in the right direction. And I will say this, Lou. I think even before this move, edge rusher was probably the biggest and most likely draft pick for the Eagles
100%.
right now.
Yeah, and I think that stands even more true right now. So their biggest test, though, comes this week. Lamar Jackson, even if you get to him, it's not guaranteed to get him down.
Week, man.
So you got to get him on the ground when you get to him on Sunday in Baltimore. Big matchup coming up. But for the offense, they got to stay balanced. They're going to have to use A.J. Brown. I want to talk about A.J. coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Locked On Eagles is brought to you by America's #1 sportsbook. It's FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel because right now, new customers, you can bet $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first bet. So just take the anytime Jalen Hurts rushing touchdown, the over on Saquon Barkley's rushing yardage, and then you'll win that $150 in bonus bets. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're wrapping up this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast with Agree or Disagree, and it has to do with A.J. Brown, Gino. And this is interesting, and I started to think about this because Sunday was like the quietest, dominant performance from a receiver that I've seen in a while. A.J. Brown has 6 catches for over 100 yards and a touchdown, over 60 yards, 65 yards over expected in that matchup. And yet, because of Saquon's historic game, like nobody really noticed. And then somebody on Twitter said that he feels like Brown is having a disappointing season. So agree or disagree, Gino, A.J. Brown's 2024 season has been the quietest of his Eagles career. I don't want to say worst, but like, what's your take on how just the passing game overall and A.J. specifically has been this year compared to the last 2 years?
I think we're getting spoiled with the wide receiver play that we've had, man. There's been some seasons where you just go back and you're like, woof. Like, I remember growing up and watching Todd Pinkston and
I'm glad we can have this conversation, though.
And I'm like, these guys are fine. But, like, Terrell Owens was sick. Like, watching Terrell Owens was unbelievable. Like, watching Torrey Smith and Elshon was definitely cool. But, like, Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin, like, that was
Are we used
way
to this
better.
already, maybe? Like, is just A.J. Brown so dominant that we just don't notice anymore? Or like,
I think our expectations are, it just, that's what it is.
Saquon's the new flashy toy. A.J.'s been doing this for 3 years.
Yeah. If you have children around the holidays, it's like you just bought them something, even if their birthday fell on, like, the week before. You know that when you buy them a new toy, they're going to go play with those toys, and heck with the old ones. We don't even care about those anymore. And I'll just say this. I don't want to live in a world where A.J. Brown isn't the Eagles' #1 wide receiver, because he clearly respects or deserves the respect and gets it from defenses, which allows a lot of other things to operate the way that they do. And Saquon Barkley, what was he with the Giants when they didn't have wide receivers? Like, everything could just be focused on your back, and now...
And it's not like he's been a decoy, Gino. On just 39 catches, he has 727 yards. He's averaging almost 19 yards a catch. Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown right now has 747 yards. That's on 71 catches. AJ has only 39 receptions this year and is 727 on the year. So I think he's
injury definitely hurts it.
It's the injury, probably. And again, it's the Saquon story, and we're kind of used to it. So I would agree that it's the quietest season he's having, but he is being, if not, like, his 17-game pace is better than last year and the year before.
I mean, you're talking about on his limited amount of catches right now, he's at 700 plus yards, and that's
nuts.
he's played 5 games this season.
Yeah.
Is that what it is? 5 out of the 11.
So they're 8-0 with AJ Brown, and
Okay, so he's played
they're
8.
1-2 without him.
Oh, okay. So he's been in 8 games. Still, I mean, you're averaging over what his average is, I think, throughout his career in terms of like yards per reception.
He's
like
on a
well over that
1,500-yard pace for 17 games, which would have broke both the last 2 years
Mhm.
total. Yeah.
Don't take him for granted. Don't take him for granted. Because when he's off the field, even when Devontae was out there, it's like it would still be awesome if AJ was out here because he does command so much respect from all of the guys that are in the back 7, and then that makes the job of Saquon so much easier. And then Jalen can have these games where he's super efficient on the ground, and him and Devontae together, that's the duo that you need both of them healthy.
It's funny. Like, Gino, he's kind of getting the Devontae Smith treatment now. Like, Devontae was underrated because of AJ, and now AJ is almost becoming a little underrated because of Saquon.
It's funny how that works.
Right?
It's funny how that works, man. But at the same time, the ship doesn't go without all of them. And
especially number 11, I'd say maybe over any of them.
Yes, I agree. How many times has he come up huge for you? Like we talk about the clutches of Saquon and Devontae Smith a ton. AJ is just as clutch as any of those guys, man. And I think that touchdown he had last game is just like super underappreciated to at least get 3 feet down. Like that's a tough catch to make. And some of the stuff he does on these little slants over the middle of the field, like you think that's easy. It's not. Like that's one of the harder routes to win, and you pay those guys because it's tough to just beat a guy one-on-one in the NFL, and this guy does it at record pace. Literally.
Yeah.
Like if he was healthy and you could turn injuries off, he would break a record every single year. For at least some, like he's going to break his yards per reception record. Like that, he's going to shatter that this year. He's going to at least be in contention to shatter whether it's the amount of catches, whether it's how many first downs he gets, whether it's the amount of touchdown catch. He is going to be in consideration to break his own records year after year after year. And I think that's when you can really measure the best. If the only person to measure them against is themselves,
right?
That's why I think we kind of take AJ for granted because it's like, who else are we measuring him against? It's AJ.
Well, and I really do think that it's become just the normal for Eagles fans. Like they've got accustomed to this, but I just, like refuse to ever let myself get to that point.
No.
I'll always be that 2019 kid.
Y'all remember Dorial Green Beckham and Josh Perkins?
I watched Jalen Reagor drop the pass on Sunday for the Chargers, which was a big play. And that'll always be where my brain's at. So I will always appreciate this.
Even Elshon, man, like the catch against New Orleans, it's like, damn, that would have been, I bet AJ probably catches that ball.
But I do think people are used to it. Maybe that is probably why, because is he having like the worst year of his career with Philadelphia? Absolutely not. Again, he is on a better average pace for 17 games in the last 2 years. He's second in the league this year in yards over expectation. The only person ahead of him is Jamar Chase. Like, Saquon's taking this rushing offense to an historic level, but they were elite running the ball without him, or at least very good. A.J. Brown, when he's not in the lineup, this is kind of a pedestrian passing offense.
Great point. That's the thing. You don't have an offensive line to go and block for these guys. Like they got to make their own magic a lot of the time.
It's up to him.
It's up to him, and he's that good. I think that's what it is.
1% conversation, man. Like we're spoiled for sure.
No, this is what it is. This is what it is, and I like to bring this quote up a lot.
Yeah,
it's from a scout. He says, "The good ones just make it look easy." And I think AJ just makes it look so easy.
Like it's almost not impressive anymore.
Yes, exactly. Like that little slant where you're like, oh, he takes it for like 35 yards. That's just who he is. I think we get used to it's the white noise. AJ's Brown has become a white noise for us.
Which is the ultimate compliment when you think about it.
It is, dude. It's like Shohei Ohtani hitting 50 and stealing 50 bases. It's like, were you shocked? Like that's kind of what the guy did during the whole season. And same with AJ. It's like, oh, we're shocked that he is going to eclipse 1,500 yards at a 12-game pace because that's what he's done his entire career.
Form of flattery, honestly.
If the worst thing you can say about a guy is that he's not impressive when he's putting up 100-yard games, like, I want to be considered that good. I want to be that good in my profession.
Catching, like it's just like it's not even happening. No,
exactly. Exactly. And like that's I mean, like the Justin Jeffersons, like you forget how good he is and you forget how good like these stars are because it's what they do. And I think the Saquon thing kind of is like that to a degree where it's like we hadn't seen that for so long.
Right.
And then it's like we got AJ and Devon. Oh, we got 1,000-yard receivers, fellas. Like, don't worry about that. We got those coming out the rear end.
That's what
it's like
we
you
do.
remember 4 years ago when we couldn't get a 500-yard receiver.
I almost need us to stop enjoying it so much. It's like a jinx for me. I don't know. It makes me a little
We
bit
need the
nervous.
Men in
We need to
Black
appreciate it.
device. And then it's like, holy cow, this guy's the best thing I've ever seen in my life every single week.
They're going to need him Sunday. Luckily for the Eagles, I think he's got a really good matchup. Marlon Humphrey's been great this year, but the Ravens secondary overall has been the weakest point of that defense. So number 11 is going to be important against the Baltimore Ravens. Sunday, 4:25 matchup tomorrow. Kevin of Locked On Ravens will join me for Crossover Thursday. Gino and I will finish up the week on Black Friday as well. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Until then, we're going to sign off for the day. Thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.